This is the Troutbitten podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
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 Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout. This is Troutbitten. This is the Troutbitten podcast. All right, this is going to be a good one because my friends Josh and Trevor are here to talk about night fishing for trout and the mouse emerger concept. Thanks for tuning in. And I just want to say thank you so much to all the listeners and subscribers out there. Your kind words, reviews, donations, and support have really given this Troutbitten podcast series a strong start. So sincere thanks to everyone out there. I'm Dominic Swantowski, owner of Troutbitten and author of Troutbitten.com. Since 2014, I've published over 700 articles on the website with stories, commentary, tips, and tactics. The website has grown into a huge resource for fly fishers. And about 40 of those articles are on night fishing for trout. In fact, the first article I ever published on Troutbitten, titled One of These Days, is about night fishing. I love the night game because everything I do in the dark is backwards from what I do in the daylight. I love it because so often I don't know what the hell I'm doing out there because there are always more questions than solutions. Night fishing is a mystery with no resolution. Almost every other aspect of trout fishing, of fly fishing, has been written about, understood, and fleshed out. The meat has been put on those bones. I mean, you can learn everything you'd possibly like to know about fishing dry flies over rising trout. There's more information than you could ever digest about nymph fishing, streamer fishing, wet fly fishing. Lifetimes of information are available at your fingertips. The lives of so many fishermen who've come before you. You can read the accounts of their discoveries, their failures, their new ideas and understandings. You may not agree with one author's approach to casting over trout that are sipping spinners, but you can go find a half dozen different methods without looking too hard. All of this information is available because the experience is there and it's documented. But the night fishing game, it's like a bare cupboard. There are very, very, very few people who've spent much time on the water at night. And there are even fewer anglers who've written or shared information about it, about their fishing experiences after dark. So go ahead, look around. You'll find a handful of articles. You'll find a few chapters in trout fishing books, often written as an add-on or an afterthought. I know of only one book that's dedicated in full to night fishing for trout on a fly rod, and that's Jim Bashline's work, The Final Frontier, which is a great book title for the subject. And because there are so few practitioners of the night game, so few anglers willing and able to put in the hours and search for those answers, we find the same beliefs repeated time after time, the same advice, the same wives' tales rerun again and again, because they sound like they should make sense. These days, almost everything we run into about night fishing is focused on mousing. And my God, when it works, there is nothing more exhilarating than the biggest wild brown trout of the season smacking your mouse fly with a vengeance. That big sound breaks the stillness. That feeling of raw power jerks the line tight in your hands, and it is electric. There's no other feeling like it in fishing. It's all the anticipation of casting and working and casting the flies for hours at a time. Patiently, methodically. It's the wonder, the not knowing if or when anything will happen. It's the blindness to where your fly really is, the unseen, and all the blanks that your mind fills in on every cast all night long. Always with hope, always with belief in the fish of a lifetime. And then that big trout eats. And that's why we do it. And I will say there is nothing like that topwater eat at night. Absolutely nothing like it. If that doesn't get the adrenaline pumping through your body until your hands are shaking afterward, then you might as well just stay home, go to bed on time, and have an easier tomorrow. So the truth is, night fishing is tough. It's the hardest thing I've ever done with a fishing rod. And I've been after it pretty steady now for a decade or more. I've fished topwater and I've fished sculpins on the bottom. I've fished wets in the middle, crawled buggers over rocks, and nymphed with everything in my box at one time or another. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Meaning, really, that consistency at night, for me, is still largely unattainable. Maybe it's not possible, but I like to think it is. And just like fishing in the daylight, I'm not going to stop until I've explored every tactic, fished every corner, and tested every theory. And all of that, though, the streamers, the wets, and nymphs fished 5 different ways, it takes a lot of time on the water to feel like you're getting anywhere with it. I mean, the whole thing, once again, is just hard after dark. So simplifying it down to mousing is a great way to start. And it makes sense that most anglers who do a few night fishing trips these days fish the mouse. It's exciting. It's pretty straightforward, and the takes are absolutely heart-stopping. What's not to love? Well, here's my answer to that. All too often, trout simply will not eat topwater at night. There are plenty of reasons, and we'll get to that later. But on so many nights, a mouse fly or another topwater pattern is ignored. Other nights, you might have 30 blow-ups on a mouse and only a few hookups, and one of those is foul hooked. Just like big streamers, at times, trout aren't looking to eat the mouse. They just bump it to see what it is, or they're trying to kill it before actually eating it. All of that, all the slashes and hits, can be exciting for a while. And then it becomes nothing but frustrating. And you're left standing there in the darkness, wondering how the hell to get a trout to eat your fly. So after years, and I do mean years, of that kind of failure, I found an answer. No, it's not foolproof, of course, but there was a fly and a handful of tactics that turned the hookup ratio around for me. I started landing far more trout by fishing what I've come to think of as a mouse emerger. And that is what we want to talk about tonight. So let me introduce to you the only 2 night fishing friends I've ever had, Josh Darling and Trevor Smith. Honestly, these are my only fishing buddies who've ever put in the time after hours and have really fallen in love with it. And I'll say, if you don't fall in love with night fishing, you're not going back out there very much. Night fishing either crawls up and gets inside you, or it doesn't. Say hello, Josh.
Hey, guys.
Hey, buddy. Hey, Josh. All right, Josh Darling, I have a question for you.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Tell us about carrying a longsword at night.
Yeah, this is a good story.
Go ahead.
So Trevor and I were night fishing together. We were relocating from one section of the stream to another. It was pretty late. We were hiking past where we had parked to get to a different spot. And real close to where we had parked was a cop car. Yeah. And he was just sitting there kind of inconspicuous and no lights on or anything. And as we approached, he slowly opened his door, stepped out of the car, and we're like, this is not good.
This is not going well.
It's like 1 a.m. It was later than that, probably. It was probably 2 a.m. at that point.
Yeah.
And he was really pretty chill. He was like, "What are you guys doing?" We're like, "We're just fishing." He goes, "Oh, thank God." He says, no kidding. He says, "I thought you guys were walking up on me carrying long swords." Referring to the wading staffs.
The wading staffs, not the fly rods.
Yeah.
But he said it like it had happened to him before.
Exactly.
Right. That's the scary part.
And that's kind of the joke we made.
Right.
It's kind of a joke we made. And we're like, man, what kind of stuff happens around here that you see?
It's good.
So we had a brief conversation with him. He was kind. He let us get back to fishing. And we kept on walking, and I said, man, if we happen to get into a real big fish tonight that gets the honor of being named, which is 2 feet or more, then we ought to come up with a name based on that. And so I said, we got to call him Excalibur or something. Lo and behold, 45 minutes later, I remember it was about 2:50 in the morning, and we hooked into a real good fish. I think, Trevor, you came up and helped me land him. It was a good fish, real strong fish, and he was about 25 inches.
He got
the name Excalibur.
Yeah,
that's actually how how the fly, the Pendragon, came about as well. Because Arthur Pendragon pulled Excalibur out of the stone.
Oh, I love
right.
it.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about
tied in.
Pendragon. Yeah, in a little bit. I'm sure we'll talk about that fly because it's awesome. What is it? Maybe the 10th, 12th cast on the Pendragon, I landed a whiskey, which in our Troutbitten group of whiskey is 20 or over. And I had twice I've had a cop shine their lights on me. They walked up, maybe 50 yards from where I was fishing. The guy did. And he just shines the light on me. He just keeps it on me for a while. And he goes, "Are you fishing?" I said, yeah. He goes, "All right." I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
It is strange, I'm sure. If you're out there, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and you're a police officer, you are, you're looking, you're
that's a sketchy
expecting
thing to see.
Yeah, you're expecting different things than guys out there fishing.
Yeah.
All right, so hey, Trevor Smith, right here. Say hi, Trevor.
Hey, how we doing?
Good, bud. All right, so Josh wanted me to ask you, why do you think you haven't caught a night namer yet?
Just throw him under the bus.
Geez.
You don't have to answer that.
Well, see, that's a question I've asked myself a lot. So, the best I can come up with, when I night fish, I predominantly fish with Josh.
Yeah.
And Josh predominantly catches the night namers. And so the common factor here is Josh. Yeah. So I'm working on a way to blame him for it.
Oh, there's lots of ways, I'm sure.
There's plenty.
Yeah. So, interesting, and this will tie back into night fishing at some point in the future, but we've been thinking about this at the end of this past night fishing season, is how much impact it may make being the second guy to fish a particular section. And you and I, Don, we were reading in a resource lately, just a theory about that, a disrupted fish returning to a feeding lie might have a little more aggression, or might have a little more.
That was Matt Supinski's book. Nexus, Trout Nexus book.
Yeah, which
stuff.
I liked because it was kind of a new look at some things, some new information, which was cool.
And
but
gives you a perfect excuse.
Also, I'm just terrible at fishing. So
that's because you're using the same flies, kind of the same tactics, hitting the same water.
Yeah,
but no night namer.
No night namers. No night namers. I know.
I will say,
it's terrible.
Yeah,
I will say, Trevor has a daytime namer, and I don't have that yet.
Yeah.
Oh well,
that's true. Stormy.
Well. All right, so I have another question for all of us, I guess. What's the scariest thing that you've ever experienced at night? Either of you?
Yeah, I've got one for this.
Yeah.
Funny enough, it wasn't alone, which is usually when things are the scariest. Your senses are heightened, and essentially, I thought that I was going to be fighting a bear, for sure.
Black bear.
Yep.
Not a grizzly. Just to be clear, we're in PA.
That's right. We're in Pennsylvania
with a long sword.
That's right.
That's right.
The waiting staff would have come into play.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, sure. Whatever you got.
Yeah.
Fight them.
Well, Dom and Trevor, you were both here for this. Trevor, you were a ways upstream from us.
Yeah.
Dom, you were downstream.
Oh,
from
yeah,
me
yeah.
ways.
I know what you're gonna say.
Yeah. So I'm fishing. It's a dark night. I'm backcasting, and I just hear something behind me.
Yep.
I look back, and there's just this kind of just black mound moving down through the water. Not necessarily, kind of straight towards me, really, and not really going perfectly with the current. Yep. And so it couldn't have been a limb or something like that, because there was some momentum to it.
Isn't that funny?
Not
how
much,
your
but
brain
some.
deduces that in a split second.
Yeah,
and it was low to the water.
Yeah.
It was large. It was wide. I'm like, and it's coming right towards me. I'm thinking,
go time.
This is a bear.
It's a bear,
no doubt. And then about 10 feet from me, real close, I hear, "Hey, guy." No joke. That's how he said it.
What time of the night is it? What time of the night?
This was probably around midnight.
Right. It's pretty late for somebody to be on.
Pretty late. At that point, I turn on my red light, and it's this like gnarly looking guy, big beard, shirtless on a black inner tube, just laying there. And he goes, "How far to the next town?"
Yeah.
What?
By himself.
By himself, middle of the night, somewhat cold night, cold water. That was something.
Yeah, he floated on down past me then. I heard voices up there, and I'm like, we don't usually talk to each other a whole lot on the stream. And if we do, it'd be more in a yelling voice. And I just heard, I heard conversational stuff up there. And then anyway, the guy ended up passing me, but I was alerted to it, so it wasn't very spooky. Coincidentally, the scariest thing that ever happened to me happened in the very same spot. So where we're talking about, we park up by the road, and I'd fished, and honestly, like, I heard coyotes that night. It was really dark. The train went by, and it was just scary. It was just kind of a spooky night, and I was by myself. And I don't know, about 1 o'clock, and the fishing was okay, but nothing special. 1 o'clock, I'm like, all right, I'm walking out of here, especially when those coyotes. Not that the coyotes are going to attack you or anything, but anyway, I was ready to get out of there. Yeah, unnerving is right. I walked up, and right in front of where I parked, so now facing my truck, I'm going to say 10 feet away, somebody was parked and I could see. And so what else am I going to do? I'm like, well, I'm going to get in my car and just drive away real quickly. And I did that. I didn't take my waders off or anything. I just popped the hatch of the Forerunner, put the rod in, and hurried up with my waders and vest on. And I just drove away. But when I turned my headlights on, I saw, again, this is the vehicle's facing me. I saw in the windshield, somebody's just staring right at me. And then there's from the driver's seat, and they're just staring at me. It was a guy with a ball cap just staring at me. And somebody in the driver's seat was kind of slumped back, looked like another guy. I don't know what was going on. You could fill in the blanks with a whole bunch of things about maybe what was going on, but
that's creepy.
There's no good explanation.
Just no.
And it was, I'm going to say, 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was scary. It was really strange. That's the only thing really to be afraid of out there is people.
Yeah. People. Yep. Absolutely.
People.
Yep.
What do you have,
people
Trevor?
who are out there at that point are usually not fishermen.
Yeah, exactly.
No, right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think most of my scariest times have been animals.
Right.
A heron gave me the biggest scare I think I've ever had. And it was when I was walking in. Yeah. And I don't know enough about herons to know if they're very nocturnal in terms of their hunting, but I was walking in one night at 10 o'clock, 9:30 in the summertime. So it was just dark. And thinking a heron standing on the bank was like a tree, was walking like right up towards it and didn't have my light on. And it didn't see me until I was pretty close, which is also odd because herons are so, wary. And so, but it spread its wings and made that like pterodactyl like noise that only herons can make.
They have a strange scream.
Yeah. And I swallowed my heart like 3 times. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced out there.
Yeah, those herons were really like, I don't know, hold their ground. I think maybe they do know you're coming, but during the day they're going like 100 yards up, around here, these ones anyway. But at night, I've had the same thing happen. They'll hold their ground.
Yeah.
Secondarily, something that's happened to me a lot, 5, 6, 7 times. A deer just jumps right in the water, right behind me. Have you had that? Yeah. I mean, guys will talk about beaver a lot, but I guess we don't have them around here that much, or the other areas that I fish. I can't say I've ever run into a beaver or had it run into me. But deer just all of a sudden just jump into the water from behind. And I hurried up. I always hurry up and flick on my lamp when that happens. And I look in their direction and they look like, oh, what?
Yeah.
What? And then they take off. But it's kind of scary.
That night you and I fished in the rainstorm. Did you hear the limb fall into the water?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty
That was
loud.
heavy rain. Yeah. Big wind.
Had that been close to anybody, that could have been pretty damaging.
Oh, for sure.
That was a large piece of wood.
But I mean, this too is true, that there's really nothing to be scared of out there.
Yeah,
that's true.
I mean, what happens out there? Nothing really.
No.
I mean, I think much less is going on at night than during the day. And I think for a long time, just inherently, I was scared of the dark and scared of what might be. And after enough seasons on the water, I just kind of relaxed and I went, nothing happens out here.
Yeah.
It's just me and the river and a couple fish. And then eventually a bearded guy in a black inner tube.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've not been night fishing as long as you have. And
yeah.
that makes me think that things happen more often than they
I
do.
think
Probably.
What's interesting, growing up a hunter, there's something like I've walked into the woods so many times early in the morning. And yet there's something about walking in at like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. knowing that morning's coming that's different and less spooky than walking in at like 10 or 11 and knowing it's just like dark. Yeah. There's something, I don't know if Josh would agree, but there's something different.
What is the difference, Josh?
You're going into an escape as well. You're gonna climb a tree. You're gonna be up real high. You're gonna be armed
in the morning.
That's true.
It's different.
That's true. You always do have a weapon, so that's nice.
Yeah,
I find that fascinating. You guys both hunt, and I only squirrel we'll talk about that some other time. But you guys having that hunting experience, and walking through the woods in the dark, and just so many other things. I don't know. I think that's why. Maybe that's why you guys have gotten into night fishing where others don't.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think there's something to that. Certainly the mentality behind it. It feels more like hunting than any other fishing.
There you
true.
go. That's true. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right, so let's take a quick break. Then we'll come right back and jump into all this mouse emerger stuff. Fulling Mill is the world's leading producer of flies, fly boxes, hooks, beads, and tippet. Known for their barbless hooks, they have many of your favorite trout patterns tied barbless. Not only that, they feature patterns from anglers like George Daniel, Pat Weiss, Josh Miller, Joe Goodspeed, and many others from around the world. Every pattern is backed by the 200% Fulling Mill guarantee. If a fly isn't up to the highest standards that you expect, they will replace it with two that are. Stock up at fullingmill.com or ask for their flies at your local dealer. Okay, so what is a mouse emerger? It was a joke at first. Just a quick sentence that I spoke in conversation to describe a surface pattern that I'd been working on and fishing that had its head up and its body underneath. I mean, that's what a dry fly emerger is, right? A surface fly with part of the body under the water, usually. And it works because it looks helpless, because it looks crippled or available to the trout. So I'd been frustrated by refusals to mouse flies over and over, and I was trying to make the fly easier to eat for the trout, something more convincing, more tantalizing, because there was too much failure, either disinterest or rejection from the trout over and over. And having part of the fly's body under the water, under the surface, just made it harder for the trout to say no.
Yeah.
That is a really interesting concept, because you notice when you fish things on top, you even run into things like the fish miss your fly more often. It's almost like that when you incorporate the surface, something changes in the commitment or the accuracy or the willingness or something. And so having something beneath the surface makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I agree with you. So why don't they, I like what you said, commitment there. Why don't they eat with that kind of commitment on top? I mean, because we all fish flies a little lower in the water column. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But what do you think it is on top that makes them not want to commit?
I wonder if it has anything to do with nighttime is a time where they're feeding in more vulnerable areas of water. This might not be the case at all, but I'm curious to know if it has anything to do with they're giving up that the seclusion of being subsurface, and making themselves more vulnerable by letting anything out there know where they're at by hitting something on top,
coming all the way to the top.
Yep.
I've always thought too how unnatural it would be for such a large prey item to be totally on the surface of the water. You know, you think of the mass of a larger prey item, and if a mouse is swimming on top, if there's a toad on top of the water, while it's certainly creating a surface disturbance, there's got to be part of that animal under the water. And part of me thinks when they come up and grab it like they do, especially because of the repeat way in which they will hit a surface fly sometimes, I think they're trying to drown it, you know? And I think, or like a cat will kind of hit something and then like hit it again. And sort of toy with it almost. I think some of these big brown trout are just like they're partially trying to kill it, partially trying to drown it.
Love that.
There's something to that.
Yeah, Trevor, you said something there that's interesting. Something about how it's almost a little bit unnatural for something to be entirely on the surface,
like all the way on the surface. Yeah,
right. So maybe even a mouse that we're imitating when we fish a mouse fly wouldn't really be like that. But the other thing is when you fish entirely on the top, when it's on the surface, then you're limiting it to really one species that could be, one prey that could be. If you're just beneath the surface, that opens it up to a whole lot of other prey that those fish are feeding on. Yeah. Even just a little bit beneath the surface, like partially on top, partially underneath, right at that level where there could be a bait fish, where there could be a fly, where there could be a crawfish, anything like that. And so it's almost like you're kind of limiting yourself by going entirely on top where you don't necessarily need to.
Yeah.
Trevor, you said too how they'll come back over and over, and maybe the idea is that is they're trying to kill it.
Yeah,
and I love that. Both those points I think are kind of similar. I don't have that happen to me in the daylight. I mean, I fish a lot of streamers, I fish a lot of nymphs, but especially let's say streamers, which is a similar size to the mouse, right? Most mice that we're fishing, most mouse flies. Anyway, I don't have them hit my streamer and then next cast, hit it again. Yeah. I have had a trout, no joke, hit it 8-10 times.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's the same trout. I guess I can't see it, but I'm assuming it's the same trout. It seems like the same trout. And I'm putting the exact same cast in there and bang, he hits it again. And I let it swing out. I'm hoping he eats it, but he doesn't. And then I put it back in and bang, he hits it. I'm going, are you kidding me? That's like 6, 7, 8 times. So being on the surface, like, why won't they commit to it? I don't know, but I do think it's the exposure thing, is what you were saying, Josh. We're just like in the daylight. I think it takes a lot more to get a trout to commit to actually eating your fly up top on a dry, in many cases, than it does to eat a nymph.
Yeah,
they have to expose themselves. Be vulnerable.
I often wonder, I'm curious what you guys think. In also thinking about what prey items could be on the top of the water at nighttime. Part of my surprise in how often they'll come back is like, sometimes you feel the weight of that fish when they hit, and it's like, they're definitely, you got to think they're feeling the hook a little, or they're feeling like the hard parts of that fly. Why do you think that doesn't scare them off?
Well, I think sometimes it does scare them off, but I do think there's enough soft in our flies. It's not a Rapala, but there's enough soft in our flies that maybe doesn't turn them off enough, right? Yeah. But I like what you said there. Like, I hear it. Often I feel that thud, boom, boom, boom. Oh, and then it's off, and then yet he comes back again.
Right.
Again, I think they're trying to kill it. Do you guys think that they're taking our flies for mice?
I think rarely.
I agree. Around here.
That's my guess. Because how often do you see that kind of thing?
Right.
And we're turning our lights on to look at that shallow water that we're fishing. That's
once in a while.
Another time. But every once in a while. Yeah.
We've seen
what you see is frogs and crawfish and bait fish.
Yes.
Right.
So much more often than mice. I don't
right.
Maybe I've seen a few mice scurrying around on a stream side. Now it's interesting. I mentioned Matt Sapinski's book earlier, and then he had a podcast, and Trevor, you and I were listening to it on the way back from night fishing. It was cool.
Yeah.
And he was interviewing Tommy Lynch, and Lynch was saying about how, that they do have a ton of mice out there. This stuck with me. He said if you sat on a bank for 5 minutes, you'd have a mouse crawl over your legs.
Yep.
And that isn't the case.
So that could be regional. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But here it's not the case.
So up there they might be eating them for mice.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're eating our, mouse flies, as we say. I don't think they're eating them for mice very often.
I agree. And I think that's where our development of patterns for this region, I think, has really been kind of cool, because I think that we're doing a better job of mimicking the type of prey that fish see here. Like Josh, you said earlier, you drop that back end of that fly underwater, and all of a sudden there's a lot more things that could be. And when we're casting up into the shallow water near the bank, I mean, in shallow, we've spotlighted so many big, I mean, we're talking 4 or 5 inch crayfish in the shallows.
Yeah, seriously.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. And so that, even if it's a more surface driven fly in 4 inches of water, that crayfish, when it swims, is going to be near the surface.
Yeah.
I should maybe we should have mentioned earlier. Anyway, to me, a surface fly, the attraction of a surface fly is that it creates a wake that is just undeniable. I mean, okay, you can put that same surface fly, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but under the water, you can put that same fly under the water, and it's obviously going to create a wake, a disturbance. The trout can feel it with their lateral line. All that's great. But you put it on top and something different happens. And it is so distinct. And I think those trout are looking for, well, some trout are looking for that. But I mean, will they commit to it? My favorite mouse fly, like actual mouse fly, is Mr. Hankey, right? I don't know if anybody's, I know you guys have fished it, but hopefully others out there have fished that too. Mr. Hankey's my favorite mouse fly. It has a nice stinger hook on the back. And it, it kind of, has foam on the back, and then a lot, and there's rabbit fur, and yeah, I get it. That a lot of that fly is kind of into the water, but not like we're talking about with this mouse emerger concept. And so Mr. Hankey really does ride high compared to this mouse emerger concept. And so my hookup ratio on Mr. Hankey is nothing like nothing compared to the hookup ratio that I get with these mouse emerger flies.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think our first night fishing together, we were using flies similar to that. And I remember us talking about, like, we did the statistics, and this is something that you talk about, Dom, with like how many hits, how many missed fish, how many hookups. And we were like 15 hits to 1 hookup, and 2 lost fish or something. It was like I think Mr. Hankey is a good example of maximizing hits and almost minimizing hookups.
Yeah, and then Mr. Hankey sits lower in the water.
Yeah.
It's funny to say Mr. Hankey does, but that's the name of the
Talk about
pattern.
it seriously.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about it seriously. But it does. It sits lower in the water than most mouse patterns. Let's say, that when a lot of people think of a mouse pattern, they're thinking of that like deer hair mouse. That deer hair mouse is boom, right on the top,
Yeah.
But even that, the Mr. Hankey fly, I don't know is, well, like you said, you can get 15 hits and 1 hookup.
Yeah.
And anyway, with this mouse emerger concept, it really, for me, did change things. It did. We're talking about some flies. All right. Let's kind of move into that. The first fly I fished like this, I called a bad mother, and it's not really much of a mouse. It's not. I don't think you could say it's a mouse fly. Yeah. Fair enough. If they take it for a mouse, great. It's an adaptation of a pattern that Rich Strolis was kind enough to share with me. Just a full deer hair head with marabou palmered on the hook shank behind the head. That's it. 2 materials. And I added a stinger hook, and I put some foam behind the collar to keep it floating, because that's what I wanted to do with the fly. I had other sculpins that would go lower in the column and stuff, but I wanted this to float more. So I put that foam tab behind the collar. And so the head of the bad mother wakes across the surface, just barely staying afloat. Just barely, but it's waking. It's creating that wake on the surface. And then you have all that marabou just undulating and pulsing underneath, looking like, I don't know, legs, fins, tails, fur. I don't know. Sure. It's very nondescript.
All the above. Yeah.
But anyway, thoughts on the bad mother, guys?
I love it. Yeah. And I think, I think that sent us off in the right direction. I think when it came to sort of developing our own pattern, I'll let Josh talk a little more about that. But I think the deer hair head is a big part of it, in terms of the turbulence that creates as you pull it through the water.
It does seem to matter.
Yeah. Locating a fly at nighttime being so important, I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah. The bad mother Funny enough, that's the fly I was fishing. It was the first night you had tied it, Dom, and you were like, "Hey, try this tonight. See if this works." I tried it, and good night. But what really won me over to that fly was catching Horton that night.
No kidding. Yeah. There's
And
another namer.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Horton.
Hey, Trevor, why do you think you haven't caught any namers? Just to be clear,
I'm starting to get a complex about this.
No,
okay?
I just want to say I've only ever caught one namer at night.
Yeah.
And so what Josh has done recently is pretty impressive.
Keeps me hungry.
Yeah. Anyway, you were saying, buddy.
Well, it was the first non-mouse fly that I found that I could manipulate what it did in the water, nearly on top of the water. So it felt like I was fishing in a mouse fly. You could do the same retrieves that you could do with a mouse fly, but you get that stinger underwater.
Right. For me, I was getting a lot of short strikes, so I figured, hey, why not throw the stinger on there? And I did it in a bit of a different way, but I like that. So let me talk about Lynch's white-bellied mouse, which is another. I'm going to call it a mouse emerger.
Yeah.
There are a lot of cool things going on in that pattern by Tommy Lynch. But what impressed me when I saw it, first of all, and what got me excited as soon as I saw it, it was the articulated back end, just hanging down in the water like that. It made perfect sense. And it was kind of a palm to the forehead moment, It's an articulated streamer, really, with the front hook featuring a good chunk of foam to keep that piece on the surface. And the foam sort of gurgler lip pushes and wakes water on the top. And the rubber legs and rabbit fur just breathe and wiggle in even the slowest currents that we'll fish it in. But then that back end, it hangs down in the water, so it's a mouse emerger. I think it's fantastic. And I had, as soon as I started using that fly, I had a lot of success. And for me, that was the bridge. The bad mother was almost a little small for the way I was tying it for some of the trout, some of the biggest trout. And then Lynch's white belly mouse, it was bigger and it was bringing bigger fish. And then, so I know you guys really started going from that into what you call the Pendragon.
Yeah. I think that those first nights out, and I think it really was having had early success with the bad mother and that deer hair head concept, and yet sort of wanting to create an articulated version of that fly and incorporate some of whether the colors we were reading about, in Bashline's book that he seemed to think made a difference, or some of the materials that we were sort of interested in, getting Arctic fox fur into the fly. And we were constantly talking back and forth about what impact these materials and colors and style of the fly could have. Yeah. And so it was sort of, it was like the dream team fly where we kind of tried to combine everything we thought that could be successful into one fly. And came out with something that to this day we use, 80% of the time probably as our go-to. Yeah.
Well, and we were frustrated after the first few times.
Fishing.
Yep. Well, absolutely.
Right.
But sometimes the frustration in night fishing comes from just being clueless. You're in the dark. You're not seeing anything, you're not hearing anything, you're not feeling anything. Right. But we were having fish, go for the flies. Yeah. And that's exhilarating, but it's a whole lot more fun to actually hook them.
Right.
Yeah.
Because like Trevor said, we were catching them.
Yeah.
It was probably about 15-1 in terms of hookups in terms of strikes to actual hookups.
Yeah.
And so it was annoying. We were talking a lot about how do we fix this? How do we actually get them to take it? And then we experienced the bad mother.
Yeah.
And that made a difference. And then we started fishing the rogue, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more later.
Right.
But we were like, man, we've got to find a way to kind of combine these things into a fly that accomplishes what we want to accomplish, which is to fish like a topwater fly, to have the control over the wake that it creates like a topwater fly, but have the ability to hook up like we're hooking up with things like the rogue,
Right. Hey, so
subsurface stuff.
So we all know what the Pendragon looks like, but will one of you guys describe, I don't know, from tail to head, real quick what the Pendragon is. But someday we'll have to do a video on it and a Troutbitten article. But right now, can somebody just go from the tail to the head?
You go ahead, Josh.
Okay.
Make Josh do it.
Yeah. The tail's it's a size 4 tail, size 2 front hook. I know, Trevor, sometimes you tie it a little bit differently, but generally the base pattern is Arctic fox tail, and then you've got a red underbody.
Yeah.
And then it's one of those like predator fiber kind of brushes that you wrap up to that, and then you tie it in. It's an orange bead between the two. And then again, Arctic fox to fill that gap. That's really, we tied that in just so that when it comes back on that back cast, it sheds water. And that way it keeps fishing the way that we want it to fish, and it doesn't get too waterlogged.
Yeah.
And then the same
moves.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. Red underbody, more of that black. Sometimes there's a little bit blue in there, that brush, and then a pretty dense and bulky deer hair head.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal because that keeps that head.
Yeah, we really jam hair in.
Yeah, but the back of the fly is exactly. But the back of the fly is heavy enough that it's just kind of keeping its nose up. It's not really riding on top.
Right, the whole fly is keeping its nose up. Yeah.
Yep.
And that back end, just like the Lynch's white belly mouse, you have the front end up and the back end underneath. There's your mouse emerger, right? Is it a mouse? No, probably not. No. But it's something that's creating a wake.
Yep.
And it's something that's also available to the trout underneath this mouse emerger concept. I love it. Hey, seriously, once again, like I don't need other night flies, right? I mean, I feel like, I remember you guys said, we have this Pendragon. I'm like, that's neat. Like, you're catching great fish on that. And then each of you were kind enough to, give me one or two. And I was like, all right, I'll fish it. I'm serious. It didn't take long. Yeah. And I was catching fish on it. And it's become one of my favorite night flies. And I'm excited to fish it more and, put my own little spin on it. Like, I feel like I want rubber legs in there, but who cares?
Yeah. Trevor does. Trevor uses those.
I usually tie those in.
Yeah. It's hard to beat rubber legs.
Yeah.
So, hey, how do we fish these mouse emergers? I think we've defined what the mouse emerger concept is. And even though it's not necessarily a mouse, but how are we fishing them?
I think that's a good.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
No, I mean, I think as you're asking that question, what's funny is I'm thinking, we started out designing a fly that we thought would do the best in terms of all that the trout was looking for. And yet in the end, I think what we did was more create a fly that was so well suited to the types of ways we wanted to fish it, and that might have been more important than even what we ended up with in the Pendragon, was just a fly that does the types of things that we want to do retrieve style wise when we fish it at night. I think the most basic retrieve that we're doing is a cast to the bank, and we're trying to wade as close to that bank as we can, typically somewhere midstream, and get our flies as close to the bank as we can. Super close. Yep. And if in fact so close that if you're pulling it off rocks to start your retrieve, that's okay.
That's all right.
That's what you want. Yeah. And typically we just let the current kind of pull it off the bank, and you write about the slow slide, and that's the description of what we're trying to do.
Right.
And I differ from Josh a little bit. I usually will pulse it a couple times off the bank. It's my first move off the bank. Once I start animating it, is usually just either 2 short strips or 2 just kind of twitches of the rod tip. I kind of like that start. But from there, as we let it swing out, typically we are doing kind of a lift and wiggle. Yeah. And that probably, I'll let maybe one of you guys talk about that a little bit, because that deserves probably a little more explanation. But that typically describes the way that we're fishing it.
Mine's pretty similar. I mean, honestly, though, I'll fish it any way you can think of. I really do. I'll drift, swing, strip, wiggle, twitch these flies at all angles and all speeds. But that's when the main thing isn't working. right?
Yeah.
And so I have my favorite way, and it's real similar to what you described, Trevor. I like to hit the bank, maybe straight across or slightly up and across.
Yeah.
You got to be super close to the bank. And then I just like to let it slide off the bank. And sometimes I twitch it, but I try not to move it too far off the bank because I believe, in my experience, that that's where most of the night feeding best trout are, is very close to the bank, picking on those bait fish that have like no defense at night. Right. So that's what I'm trying to do, is slow slide it off the bank. Go ahead.
When you cast it to the bank, can you describe where you try to lay your fly line down? Is it in a straight line with that fly, or are you trying to lay it down on one side or the other?
Oh, that's a cool question. That depends on current speed, right? And so if I have a slow current speed, I'm probably going to try to throw a little bit of a curve or a loop, not a loop, but a curve, an arc downstream so that fly will start to move off. And if I have a faster current, I'll do the opposite. And I'll throw a tiny bit of slack upstream, or an arc upstream of that fly. That makes sense, right? I'm sure you do the same thing.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. And that's technical stuff. That's cool. I mean, I love that stuff.
I wonder, is there any difference for you guys between when you're fishing something that's more topwater and more subsurface? Is there any difference in how you orient the head during the drift? Because with a topwater fly, I'm a little bit more, I think, willing to not point the head downstream as much.
Gotcha. And you were saying head downstream, just to be, I'm with you.
The head of the fly.
With you. I want to make sure everybody understands. We're saying the head of the fly pointed downstream. Yep.
Yeah. Slightly. Not necessarily. Not straight downstream.
Right. But when I do surface patterns, I like the head of the fly pointed more upstream, not directly, but
that's what I was wondering. Because that's what I've noticed that I like as well. Not always upstream, but at least towards me.
Right. As I said, I'll try every direction, everything, but my baseline approach, if you gave me $100 to catch one tonight, I'd probably spend most of my time casting across, but maybe even crossing slightly down, so that I can use that best part, in my opinion, best part of the drift, which is where the head of the fly is faced across, but slightly up. And then eventually, as it swings out and off the bank, it's pointing to me and to my rod tip.
Yeah.
And now it's pointing pretty far upstream, the head again.
Yeah.
And that's, again, like Josh is asking, I'm saying for a surface fly, that's what I like best.
Yeah. I think there's definitely something to that that's triggering. And I think that when you combine it with that wiggle, and what we're talking about is you kind of raise the rod tip.
We should mention that,
raise the rod tip, and you're kind of lifting the fly line off the water until just the leader, maybe even a foot of the leader even might be, connected to the fly on the water, but you're even lifting some of the leader, and you're kind of shaking the rod back and forth. And you can do this at a kind of, the wiggle. You can do it at a slow rate. You can do it fast. Yeah. And it's pretty cool if you can watch the fly and what it's doing, especially these flies we're talking about. It creates this sort of like pattern of wake that is vibratory almost. And there is something about that like if you see your fly moving through the water when you're doing that, in your mind you'd think you'd be jerking that fly back and forth, but in reality it really does give the impression of a swimming object, and that's pretty cool.
What you just described, Trevor, and I call it the hang and the wiggle, but as you said, there's not much line on the water. When you pick up your line, again, we're only casting 30 feet. I'm going to just round it off, 30 feet. We're casting 30 feet to the bank, and we're doing this, letting it slow slide off the bank. And now you kind of get to that 45 degree down and across. I think you're with me, guys. And down and across the angle. And now we might pick up that rod, and then that brings the fly a little closer to us, and it brings all the fly line and some of the leader off of the water. So like Trevor said, we might only have 1 or 2 feet of leader even on the water. Anyway, now we wiggle it and just shake. Just wiggle. And what Trevor described is perfect. I mean, just does this kind of swim back and forth. And, I mean, it's the kind of action that you need to see it during the daylight. Yeah. And so I mean, believe it or not, I did a lot of night fishing tactics during the day. I just spend the whole day doing night fishing tactics. To be honest, I caught very few fish, but that wasn't the point. I wanted to see, I wanted to see what the bad mother and what the Lynch's white belly mouse. I haven't done it with your pendragon yet, but I want to do that during the daylight. I want to see what the pendragon looks like during the daylight.
Yeah.
Almost all of these tactics I've done during the day so you can see them. And what Trevor described is exactly right. It's not overdone at all. It's just this hang and wiggle, as I call it. And I've written an article about it on Troutbitten. You can go find that. Hang and wiggle, 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 and then you let it settle. And honestly, right after you let it settle, within 2, 3, 4, maybe
we're
5
all shaking
seconds,
our heads. Yeah.
Right. We're all nodding our heads. Yeah. It's like, it gets
like
exciting.
Get them interested and
That's
then
when
feed it to them. Get them
Yeah.
interested, then feed it to them.
Feed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to experiment with when I'm out there, and it's because you can kind of calculate and change what you're doing. And so, Dom, you and I have talked about this, but with the hang and wiggle, I'm pretty methodical about actually counting out how long I'm going to hang, and how long I'm going to wiggle, and that's because if it's not working the way that you feel like it should be working, because it's a good way to fish at night.
It is.
And there's a lot of confidence in that. So when it's not working, I'm like, maybe it'll work if I just reverse it. I'm going to wiggle way less. I'm going to let it hang longer.
Wow. I like that.
And just experiment. I'm going to wiggle it for a while. I'm going to keep it swimming like for 8 seconds, and then I'm going to let it settle for like 2,
I like that.
And you can experiment, and you can figure out maybe it's not the method that's wrong, but it's the timing.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, I'll be honest, my patience is not good enough at night. You're talking about waiting for 8 seconds to do the next motion. That's hard for me. And I need to be more disciplined with that. I'm always wanting to do the next motion. I'm always wanting to do the next strip or twitch or swing it out a little faster. And obviously, I mean, that patience, and you're not the only one to say it, Josh, but that patience can be, well, the difference between, catching an aimer and not, or catching
Stop talking about me.
No, seriously, I do. I think you got to let them find it. You got to let them find it. And that wiggle is powerful, right? But wiggle, 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 and then hang. And Josh is saying, let it hang longer. I think it's good.
Yeah. I wonder if we don't, and these are factors that are hard to know always, but I wonder if some amount of that dialing in has to do with the turbidity of the water, the speed of the water that night, the depth of the water, because you just said you got to let them find it. And I think that's an important concept at night to remember. While these fish do an incredible job of seeing and locating and finding that fly, which I still find fascinating.
Yes.
That they do such a good job of it. Right. Their pinpoint accuracy is not there. And we've all seen fish blow up on a spot 3 or 4 inches or 5 inches beside our fly, right?
Wow.
Because they're not quite on. And so maybe there, I'm always thinking like, what is it about that? And maybe there is something to on those nights where there's a little more turbidity or less clarity of the water. Maybe they have a little harder time finding it. And maybe that those nights when you animate less, you're giving them a better chance of success.
Ooh, that's good. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Those are good thoughts. Now we just got to go out there and prove it.
I know. I want to go night fishing now.
I know. Hey, this is is it a Thursday? No, it's a Friday. But, a lot of times we fish together on Thursdays, but we have some really high water conditions. And I mean, high water's okay, but muddy and high, we elected to do a podcast instead.
Yeah, exactly. I actually called Josh. I called Josh after work yesterday and just said like, hey man, it was honestly really hard to get through the day. And I didn't realize why until I left work, and we just, we didn't have any night fishing plans. So it was tough. Yeah. It's tough to break that.
Well, like I said, you're the only night fishing buddies I've ever had. And that's cool. What I love is what we're doing right now, is just bouncing these ideas. What you were just saying is really cool. It's a lot for me to think about. And what Josh was saying about the different things about the pendragon. I love it. You're just thinking about the time. Just doesn't have to be the pendragon, but the hang and wiggle and letting it hang more. Yeah. And so I guarantee next time I'm out there, I'm going to count. I'm going to go wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And I'm going to count to 8 seconds because Josh told me to. Seriously. Then I'll catch the next namer.
That's
I love
awesome.
it.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, let's move on. I got to keep it rolling. Let's keep it rolling.
You can call him Old Ben for the
Who's
clock.
that?
You'll call your next namer.
The next namer, yeah. Old Ben, because you're letting it just tick, tock, tick.
That's
I
good.
love it. We'll call him
That's good. I like that.
That's good.
I'm a professional night namer. That's my role if I can't catch namers.
That's
you
right.
name other people's night namers. I like it. All right. So, hey, are there other styles of emergers? Right. Let's talk about that. Sure, there are, in my opinion. In the daylight, I use something like a clink hammer as a floating emerger. We all do. Then I use unweighted soft hackles to fish the surface film or just inches underneath with an unweighted soft tackle or similar. Maybe too, it's dropped behind a dry fly or even fished on a greased line, right? That soft tackle. And finally, I fish flies like the old school Gary LaFontaine deep sparkle pupa as an emerger that's under the water a little further, but not necessarily too far. I like to ride them about a foot underneath during a caddis hatch, maybe. You can ride them deeper, of course, but the point is that an emerger, in this case, is at the top or very close to it, not too far from the top, right? An emerger. So I've mentioned this a lot in the Night Fishing for Trout series on Troutbitten. And again, you can find that in the menu of Troutbitten, Night Fishing for Trout series. But the most important thing I've ever learned about night fishing, seriously, this is it. The most important thing I've ever learned. It took about 12 years for me to finally understand this. And was to keep the fly above the trout. To me, it seems obvious, But I read so many other things that said, hey, get it down there to them. That's where the trout are. And it makes sense because during the daylight, often that's what I'm doing. I'm getting my sculpin down deep. But at night, I want to keep the fly above the trout. This mouse emerger concept does just that. It also wakes across the surface, but then, in the flies that we were talking about, it wakes across the surface, and then it gives them something underneath to eat. But I'll say too that sometimes taking those flies, or the flies taking flies that are designed to ride just a bit deeper, maybe in the first few inches below the surface, not necessarily on the surface, but now just below the surface, that has absolutely changed things for me. Just like the Bad Mother did, I started tying a pattern called the Rogue, which for me was the lightest streamer I'd ever tied. And some other day, I'll go through the specifics of it, right? But it is super light. And if I was to put an inches per second on it in water that's not even moving, let's say it falls at maybe 2 inches per second, maybe 1, 2. It's very, very light. And it sheds water on the back cast, a lot like your Pendragon does, guys. It sheds water on that back cast. It's built for that. Yeah. Whatever water it collects, boom, it's gone on the back cast. So it enters, and then it just easily goes through the surface and under the surface though, and fishes 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 inches below. By the end of the drift, it's probably not more than 8 or 10 inches below the surface. And I feel like I can control that depth below the surface. To me, that's kind of an extension of this mouse emerger concept. So again, instead of being in the surface, now it's slightly below. And so I know you guys have done a lot with this too, with something you call a Gypsy Queen, and I know you fished the Rogue and even the Pendragon with split shot. Tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, we've taken some things that you kind of worked on, and the Rogue in my case was one of those that the Gypsy Queen is really just a dressed up and larger size of the Rogue. I put a lot more bulk into it, into the head in particular, and then into the body too. I create a pretty thick body on it. But the materials are, when we're talking these flies, we're talking about the gauge of hook we're using because we're that specific about the type of weight we want the fly to be.
Right.
And then the materials are a big part of that too. The Rogue and the Gypsy Queen for me versus the Pendragon. The Pendragon's head floats, right? And the Gypsy Queen, the Rogue, when I tie the Gypsy Queen, I am using a minnow brush at the head, but then I'm also using a bruiser blend, like wool blend at the head that does hold a little more water, and it gets that head to ride under more consistently. And so I know that when I'm fishing it, it is fishing under the surface because it does hold a little bit more water. But yet the whole fly, when you hold it dry, it's incredibly lightweight. And even wet, it isn't holding a ton of water, but
sheds water. Right.
Yeah. Right. But I'm not trying to keep the head afloat on that. But,
I think these flies we're talking about, the Gypsy Queen and the Rogue and maybe some others, it's different than, just taking your average streamer and saying, well, I'm going to I'm going to throw that at night. Yeah. Most of those want to fall. I mean, they want to fall, even if they're unweighted, they don't have lead eyes and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But they want to fall just because of the, like you said, Trevor, just because the weight of the hook diameter. And so these are, I don't know, sort of specialized flies that we're talking about.
Yeah. And sometimes being on top, it's not, or sometimes having something hanging down from on top isn't enough and they still won't go for it. And so take it down a little lower. That's the interesting thing about what we're doing is generally we're working from the top down.
There you go.
Instead of from the bottom up.
There you go.
Yeah. We're going to the top of the water and then we're seeing, does this work? Because it's real fun when it does.
Yes.
And then we're working down until we find the fish.
I love that.
Yep. And you mentioned earlier, Dom, that you love night fishing because it's like the reverse of everything you do in the day.
It is.
That's a good example of that.
That's so true. Yeah, I often, in the daytime, I'm kind of a nymph first guy because that's what trout want to eat. And then, even I'm often trying to hit the strike zone with my nymphs. And then I'll find that they're eating my tag fly more often on on my nymph rig, which my tag fly, let's say, is 20 inches up. So maybe I start going, maybe I should focus on the mid column. And so, let's say arguably it's a bottom up approach during the day and the reverse at night, like we're talking about. Do you guys ever fish the Pendragon with split shot? That's a loaded question. I know Josh had a really good night doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. A couple weeks ago, we all fished together. And again, the method was start on top and fish down. And none of us were doing all that well.
No.
And we were carrying radios. So we knew none of us were doing all that well. And we were bouncing some ideas off of each other and like, all right, what's working? What's not? Nothing was working. And so, I had a somewhat waterlogged Pendragon, but it was still hanging on the top. And I'm like, well, instead of switching to another fly, I'm going to keep pretty much everything the same. I'm just going to put this fly underwater a little bit. And so I didn't put much weight on it, but enough to get it under.
What would you say? I mean, like a number one shot or a BB shot?
About a number one is what I had.
That's not
exactly
much,
what I had, actually.
But it's just enough. Yeah.
Yep, it's exactly what I put on it. That's, with streamers, that's usually the first one that I'll put on, the number one. And so it was almost the same. In fact, even though it wasn't on the top and even though it wasn't causing a wake, I was still able to, felt like I was still able to pull off that wiggle.
And with that larger, pretty good profile deer hair head, I'm sure, like we said earlier, it was pushing a lot of water underneath.
Yeah.
Disturbing that lateral line of anything that was nearby. And you clearly were, because you did a lot better than Trevor and I did that night. It's funny because we got kind of to the end of the night and I caught up with you and I knew that from the radio, from the walkie-talkies, I knew that you had been fishing the Pendragon. I was like, man, so almost everything was like on top, huh? And you go, well, I had a split shot on. You son of
yeah. That was the start of a 2-week stretch where Josh caught fish and I didn't. Yeah, but back to the other ways to fish, under the surface too. That the final week we went out that I had some success. I did a style of retrieve that I don't do very often at all, but I began to. I keep some Pendragons around that I've tied less densely. The head is less dense than some of my like first stringers.
Yep.
And my second stringers I keep around because they waterlog more quickly and they'll fish under the surface.
Yep. So
just using one of those second stringers and just swinging it without any animation, it was just crazy. It took a lot of restraint to not animate it at all. But I got into fish again.
I love
it. On the swing.
And that's what Josh is saying. I think maybe we both need to be more patient like this guy.
Yeah, right. Let them have it.
Let them find it, right?
Let them find it.
All right, let's wrap this up. Let's wrap this up a little bit right here. The mouse emerger idea kind of has nothing to do with a mouse necessarily. It's about taking the benefits of a topwater pattern at night and then making it a little harder for the trout to resist, easier to eat, by having a good portion of the fly actually under the water, sometimes all the way under the water. Then in some cases, we might take similar patterns and, like I said, get them all the way under the water and fish them that way. But we keep it in the first, I'm going to say 3 to 12 inches of the water column if we're doing that. But always, we're fishing the fly above the water with this, again, mouse emerger concept. And most of the times, right there in the surface film with only part of the fly underneath. All right. So thank you, Josh and Trevor. Thanks for being part of this conversation,
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll do much more on this topic together. But I think it's been good to keep this dialogue focused on just one aspect of the night game. We're not trying to cover everything here in one sitting. And there's plenty of time to do more of that in the future, And thanks to everyone out there who's listening. If you're interested in night fishing and want to learn a lot more and go beyond mousing and the mouse emerger stuff, there are about 40 articles so far over at Troutbitten. Find them under the category Night Fishing for Trout. It's right there in the menu. As always, if you have ideas, questions you'd like to have answered, or topics you'd like to hear us cover, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. All right, Trevor, read us out.
Remember, troutbitten.com is a free resource for all anglers, so dig in and check it out. Navigate through the menus and find what you like. Share it, leave a comment, use the search page if you're looking for something specific. Navigate by way of the categories and tags, too. Thank you so much for listening. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment. That really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water.